April 28th, 2026. This is our way of handling the day's Democracy Now! Stories. We do not just repeat headlines. We hold on to the few facts that actually carry the weight of the story, then pull out the deeper lesson about power, institutions, and daily life. Story 1. Iran has offered a new deal. Lift the blockade of its ports, stop threatening renewed bombing, and it will give up control over the Strait of Hormuz. Washington appears unwilling to take it. China and Russia blocked a UN resolution to reopen the waterway, while the UN Secretary-General warned that fuel, fertilizer, transport, and insurance costs are now cascading toward a global food emergency. The deeper lesson is that a choke point never stays about oil. Once the root breaks, food, shelves, and political stability start breaking with it. Story 2. The war's physical reality is getting harder to hide. The Iranian Red Crescent says it submitted evidence of more than 132,000 civilian structures bombed, including hospitals, universities, research sites, and bridges. At the same time, reporting says Iranian retaliation did far more damage to U.S. bases and systems across the Gulf than Washington admitted. The deeper lesson is that modern war is no longer measured mainly by territory taken. It is measured by how much of ordinary life can be turned into damaged infrastructure. Story 3. Lebanon's ceasefire is still being sold as diplomacy, while the facts on the ground still look like coercion. Israel issued new evacuation warnings, struck southern Lebanon again, and its defense minister threatened to burn Hezbollah and all of Lebanon. Hezbollah's leader condemned the talks, and Hezbollah still remains outside the room where those talks are happening. The deeper lesson is that diplomacy becomes theater when the people who can still impose violence are not actually bound by the negotiation. Story 4. Gaza held municipal elections for the first time in 2 decades. People voted with wooden ballot boxes and felt-tip pens in the middle of devastation, with turnout especially low in Gaza and Hamas boycotting the West Bank race. That may sound small next to war, but it is not small. The deeper lesson is that civic life tries to survive even inside ruin. A society is not only what gets destroyed, it is also what keeps trying to govern, count, choose, and rebuild anyway. Story 5. Wendy Sherman, once one of the top figures in the Biden State Department, has now said openly that Netanyahu's course in Gaza, with U.S. participation, has in essence created a genocide. That matters less because it adds one more accusation, and more because it comes from someone who once stood inside the center of policy. The deeper lesson is that legitimacy usually collapses inside the record before it collapses in official policy. The language of power follows later. Story 6. Sudan remains one of the least properly weighted crises in the whole file. A drone strike hit a camp for displaced people. Dozens were wounded. Measles has killed scores. Cholera is spreading. Famine is confirmed. Human rights workers say detainees are being held in horrific conditions. The deeper lesson is that collapse can become background noise for the rest of the world, while remaining total reality for the people inside it. Some disasters are ignored not because they are small, but because they last too long. Story 7. The redistricting fight in Virginia, Florida, and Texas shows how elections are increasingly being decided before anyone votes. Each party is trying to redraw maps to lock in more seats while it still can. The deeper lesson is that democratic conflict now happens upstream from Election Day. By the time ballots are cast, a large part of the contest has already been shaped by lines, procedure, and legal timing. Story 8. The Supreme Court case over Roundup may sound technical, but it could determine whether thousands of cancer claims survive. If Bayer wins, federal labeling rules could wipe out state-level lawsuits that gave ordinary people a way to fight back. The deeper lesson is that some of the most important power shifts arrive dressed as procedural law. A narrow ruling on labels can decide whether a giant company remains vulnerable to the public at all. Story 9. More than 600 Google workers are demanding the company reject classified Pentagon AI work, warning about lethal autonomous weapons and mass surveillance. That sits beside the broader fight over military AI contracts across Silicon Valley. The deeper lesson is that the real tech struggle is no longer only about who builds the most powerful tools. It is about who those tools finally serve, once they can see, predict, and act at scale. Story 10. California's billionaire tax initiative already has more than enough signatures for the ballot, and Silicon Valley has poured huge money into defeating it. Sergey Brin reportedly moved to Nevada in time to avoid it, and then pressed Gavin Newsom to oppose it. The deeper lesson is that wealth does not resist redistribution in theory. It reorganizes residents, influence, and political pressure in practice. Money protects itself by moving faster than law. Story 11. The attempted assassination case tied to the White House Correspondents' Dinner is now shifting into a fight over rhetoric. The suspect has been charged, while Trump officials are blaming left-wing language, and the First Lady is calling for Jimmy Kimmel to be fired over a joke. The deeper lesson is that after an act of violence, the first political struggle is often over. Who gets to define its meaning? The through line today is simple. Systems under stress do not just become harsher. They become more strategic about where pressure is applied. Straits, maps, labels, courts, budgets, and narratives all turn into instruments. The deeper story under today's headlines is that power now works less by broad persuasion and more by controlling the narrow places where whole systems have to pass.